r/Nosleep. Posted by u/ChristianWallis. My crew was hired to refurb a derelict cruise ship. What happened to the passengers will haunt me forever. Right, I said, raising my voice on deck to make sure I could be heard. There were 4 of us, me up front and 3 others lounging around on deck chairs. What have we got so far? The anchor's bad, Cole answered, sitting upright to rub a hand over his shaved head. I'm not sure I'll be able to get it up. It's held out for 30 years and isn't coming easy. Well, we kinda need to get it up, I replied. Especially if we're going to get this baby to a dock. If we need to, he said, we can cut it, but I'm not sure we've got anything that can do the job. I'll speak to Kasim's men, I replied. How's the rudder? Looking good, Gareth answered. The rudder is good. Anything else? We found a leak, Charlie said, crossing her boots with a sigh. Bottom deck is flooded, but we can't be sure why the water level is still. A leak's bad news, Gareth groaned. It is, I said, let's get down there. Charlie, Cole, you ready for a dive? Aye aye, they cried. Already brought the suits up, Charlie added. Sounds good, I said. Let's get going. With that, Charlie and Cole left. Out of all of us, they had the hardest job, and from the keen looks in their eyes they made their way below deck, they took it seriously. I nodded approvingly at Gareth as he walked over. He handed me a coffee and we began to carefully pick our way across the open deck where we stood. It looked like it had been a sunbathing area with a nearby bar. Now all that furniture was just broken wreckage left strewn across the floor. They're good guys, I said. They're taking all of this well. It does seem pretty good on paper, doesn't it? Gareth said. We had been hired ahead of any other crew and sent to board the ship on our own. Our job was to have some kind of inventory ready to go the second the buyer's crew arrived. After that, we would organize and manage the repair effort based on our initial reports. It does, I said. I would say that, except... Nothing about this place feels good? Gareth asked. You have to wonder, don't you? Looking at all this shit. I picked up an old handbag that had been lying on the floor. I know it was a sudden evacuation, but I'm not sure the captain went crazy like they say. You think it was something else? Gareth asked, arching one eyebrow towards me. This place is creepy, but I've just been putting it down to nerves. I don't know. I shrugged and tossed the handbag to the floor. It'd help if it was a big story, you know? If there were articles and interviews with pissed-off passengers, standing on some dock with dripping wet hair, moaning about how the captain had abandoned ship for no damn reason. I showed him the purse I'd taken from the handbag, opening it up to reveal a faded driver's license. I just get a funny feeling when I look at stuff like this. I know it was 30 years ago, but you'd think there'd be something online, wouldn't you? The rescue effort must have been huge. You think conspiracy? I don't know, I said. This place just feels weird. It's just the heebie-jeebies, he replied, doing his best to make us both feel a little better. Besides, I mean, well, we're here now. True. I nodded. You're probably right. Just the heebie-jeebies. Gareth chuckled at my use of probably. I gotta go, he said. This conversation isn't doing me any favors. I waited for him to leave, shouting a final thanks for the coffee. He waved goodbye and I watched him turn a corner. Once he was gone, I opened the purse again and ruffled through the papers. Most of them were old receipts, but something caught my eyes. A folded square of old paper towel, something taken from a dinner table perhaps. It was wrapped around an old dinner knife, the tip snapped off and nowhere to be seen. I unrolled it and found a message written in old lipstick. The writing was desperate, the letters jagged and harsh. They hurt me, it read. What the hell is that supposed to mean? I whispered. Get up here. Gareth's voice sounded tinny and distant. I was alone, hearing it filtered through the radio at my waist. What is it? I asked. You've to come. Fucking nuts. You won't. Fuck's sake, I grumbled. Alright, where are you? Top deck. It's zing. Gareth? You still there? I cried before resigning myself to a short walk. This better be fucking good. Only when I climbed all the way to the top deck I found it empty. Deck chairs were stacked toward the aft, and parasols, bleached white in the sun, lay torn and lifeless along the floor. Occasionally a gust of wind would catch one of the shredded flaps and it would struggle like a bird with a broken wing, the sudden sound touching a nerve deep inside me. Most of this deck was taken up by a large swimming pool, the scum-covered surface disturbed only by old foam toys and deflated beach balls that floated eerily in the wind. Each one was a furry shape engulfed in algae, pacing those choked waters like patient predators. Directly ahead was a water slide. A twisting multicolored tunnel of plastic that rose upwards for 30 feet. It looked faded and pale and was grown over with speckles of green algae. Halfway up, one of the sections turned transparent, offering a once tantalizing view of the sea. Something caught my eye up there, and to get a better view I walked around the edge of the pool until the acrylic caught the sun and I could see right through it. There was a fuzzy dark shape, something that if I squinted just right looked like it could be big enough for a person. Suddenly my radio flared up and I caught the tail end of Gareth's voice. "Gotta help. Stuck. Fuck." The shape moved silently against the hard plastic. It looked like there could be someone stuck up there. "Is that him?" I wondered. "Gareth, where are you?" "Up. Just. Up here." It must be him, I decided, and I couldn't quite work out what to feel about that. I sure as hell wanted to be angry. I had to assume it was him, didn't I? There was no one else, so it had to be. And that meant I'd have to crawl up there and help him out. And I guess that was where my thoughts started to dribble away like candle wax. Because going up there was just about the scariest fucking thing I could imagine doing. It wasn't just the thought of the danger. It was that place. Even just walking around the pool, stepping quietly over old swimsuits and dropped champagne flutes, I felt as if any second something was going to lunge out and pull me down and I would disappear into that opaque slimy water. The pool would be deathly still within seconds, and if anyone came looking, they'd never know I'd even been up there. They'd never even know what happened. "Gareth!" I cried as I reached the foot of the ladder. This is a seriously fucking stupid thing you've done. I must be alone up here," I told myself, barring Gareth. I know I am, because nothing else makes sense. No one's aboard this thing except us. And if I am alone and I have to help, there are no two ways about it. He could get seriously hurt in the time it takes me to find the others. Any feelings I have about those murky waters are irrational. Just like that old church I had to walk past as a kid. It looked scary, that was all. This place looks scary, but it's dead. Lifeless. Nothing to be afraid of. So I took my first step and immediately noticed the awful noise that rickety frame made. Every footfall on the ladder rattled all that metal, and the plastic slides like an earthquake, and it took every ounce of courage to get up there. I'm not often afraid of heights, but up there you felt like you were stood on a collapsing tower. Every gentle turn of the ship was magnified 1,000-fold, so that even I started to feel a pang of seasickness. Not thinking, I crawled towards the tunnel entrance and went in head first, hoping to get this all over and done with. The plastic was dry as a bone and my hands gripped it easily, so that was something. I pulled myself along at a good pace, uncomfortably aware of how the claustrophobic tube was made for bodies much smaller than mine. How Gareth had thought it was a good idea to go down was beyond me, and I spent most of the way swearing quietly under my breath. The furious muttering is a nice release, enough to keep me going until I reached the acrylic see-through tube. Somehow, the space before me was empty. I'd arrived at the midsection only to find a scratched view of the cloudy sky. For a moment I replayed events in my head. Had I seen what I thought I had? Or had he somehow gotten free? But there was no way he could have gone down. With the way the slide was rocking, I would have noticed. And he definitely didn't come my way. But the proof was before my eyes. He wasn't there. I was alone. Or so I hoped. "Gareth!" I cried. "What the fuck are you playing at?" I don't know why I shouted anything. I hadn't wanted to hear a reply, not even from Gareth. What I wanted, what was slowly expanding in my mind like a blooming star eclipsing every other thought, was to get the hell out. But something did reply. A thud. A loud and angry sound coming from the very bottom of the tunnel, out of sight. And I didn't just hear it. I felt it. The tunnel shook. The vibrations passed up my hands. Another thud, and my whole body locked down with terror. Something is coming, I thought. My skin grew cold, my scalp tightened, and my heart started skipping every other beat. There were a few explorative thumps before they exploded into a galloping spring, the owner barreling up that slide with unseen fury. Something inside me finally broke. I began to backpedal in a crab walk, not even bothering to turn. Only now my hands gripped nothing. The once firm plastic was smooth and slick, and I couldn't get enough traction to pull myself upwards. I lost all coordination and had to fight with everything I had just to keep myself in one place, my feet kicking black marks into the vinyl and my hands squeaking against the plastic. I wanted to turn, but I couldn't take my eyes off that bend in the tunnel. What will come around there? I thought. What stinking wet thing is speeding towards me? I don't know if it was sweat or just clumsiness, but eventually what little grip I had gave way. The tunnel seemed steeper than it ever had before, and gravity finally started to bear my weight downwards. For long agonizing seconds the plastic was as slippery as ice and I was helpless to stop myself moving. My mind turned white hot with terror and all my thoughts were burned away and replaced with a near hallucinatory state of despair. I screamed the whole way down only to land in that wretched green water with a bassy plunk, the soup-like water too thick to give off any splash. I broke the water in a state of total hysteria, gagging as I sucked in lungfuls of rotten miasma. That organic soup had been stewing for 3 decades, and if I had to guess, I was the first thing to break the surface for a long, long time. The result was near intoxicating, enough to leave me on the cusp of unconsciousness. But I fought to stay lucid and pushed through that stringy muck, its hairy tendrils clinging to my wrists and ankles with an almost lifelike animation, and heaved myself over the pool's edge to collapse on the floor. There I lay panting, confused and desperate, only to hear something else come from the pool beside me. Kaplunk. The water looked undisturbed, but then again it would, wouldn't it? It was hardly even water, more like a tangle of weeds and slimy algae suspended in ooze. Something was in there, I knew it. It was an irrational thought, one of many I'd had in the last few minutes, but God, I was certain that there was something in that damned water. Another sound. A loud screech. The sound of a child riding a slide. I looked up and saw the water slide's mouth rimmed by a dozen pale hands. Children's hands. Their owners crouched out of sight in darkness. I ran screaming from that deck, unable to wait any longer, unwilling to take the risk of seeing who, or what, would emerge from that water. Gareth found me lowering bags onto the deck of our yacht below, my clothes rancid and dripping wet. I jumped when he called my name, and he jogged over with concern on his face. "We're leaving," I said as soon as he was in hearing range. "We're getting the fuck out of Dodge. Get Cole. Get Charlie. Let's go." I could see that Gareth was about to tell me something urgent, but then the state of my clothes caught his eye and he stopped himself. "What happened?" he asked. I don't know," I said. "Did you radio me to get up on top deck?" "No." He shook his head. "Have you spoken to me at all this morning? After our meeting?" "No." "So you didn't stay in contact with?" "What are you on about? I haven't radioed you once. What the hell happened to you?" Did you go for a swim?" he asked incredulously. "Not voluntarily," I answered. "And I didn't go alone." "What is that supposed to mean?" "This place is fucked," I said. "Something is aboard this ship and it took a shot at me and I'm not about to give it a second chance. Get Charlie and Cole before they dive. Tell them we're leaving in the next 20 minutes. Gareth's face darkened. "Cole hasn't surfaced," he said. "They went down but he never came back up and Charlie's down there, passed out. I didn't want to move her, but I don't know what's wrong. Did someone attack you up there? Do you think they hurt Cole?" I didn't have time to explain everything to Gareth, so I grabbed him and tried to give him the cliff notes as we hurried to where he'd left Charlie down below. He kept poking holes in my story along the way and oh boy did that piss me off. I had to guess he was just trying to rationalize it, but I felt like he was maybe missing the point. We weren't alone, and that was all I needed to set my ass sailing towards the horizon. By the time we reached Charlie I think I'd certainly spooked the guy a little bit. He looked shaken up. But I'm not sure he believed my story word for word, like he thought I'd maybe taken a tumble and knocked my head on the way down that slide. Not that it mattered, something I was reminded of when we found Charlie changing out of her suit. She was in a mad rush. "We need to fucking go," she cried, scrambling towards us with her things in hand. "We can't leave," Gareth said. "We have to get Cole." "No," Charlie shook her head. "He's gone. Whatever the fuck was down there, it got him. We gotta go." "You sure?" I asked. "Yes," she answered. "I tried. Believe me I tried but he's gone." "Let's go," I said. "For the love of God let's just fucking go." To our soul-crushing horror, when we reached the railing we found nothing but grey water staring up at us. Perplexed, I reached out and gave the rope a tug, almost as if to check the very truth of my senses. Just a short while ago I'd been climbing that rope and loading the yacht below. By definition, the yacht had to be wherever the rope was. They simply had to be together. So how could there be one without the other? We stood there in a traumatized silence until at last Gareth spoke up. "What happened down there, Charlie?" he asked. "What the fuck is going on?" "Give it up," I said as Gareth tried the backup radio for what must have been the 100th time that hour. "We know Kasim's men will be here sooner or later." "It's just fucking stupid," he cried. "It was working this morning, all of them were. How the hell can it be down now?" We have a radio. A backup. A backup for the backup. 4 different satellite. It's this place, Charlie said, her legs pulled up to her chest as she took a long drag from a cigarette. It's got us where it wants us. What the fuck does that even mean? Gareth cried. You know exactly what I mean, she said. I told you plain as day, something took Cole. 1 second he was there, the next he was not. You can't even say what it is, he replied. For all you know he got stuck on something and we could. He was fucking dead, Gareth. I found his damn mask. There could be an air pock. He's dead, Charlie said, slowly withdrawing back into herself, her eyes glazing over. That leak we found was repaired. We weren't the first to come here and try patching her up, and whatever got the last fuckers before they could pump the water is going to get us next. Charlie, I said, sitting beside her with deep concern. It would help me a lot if we knew what we were dealing with. What else did you see? She shuddered and took a long slow breath. People, she said. Or bodies. Lots and lots and lots of them. I'd say 2, maybe 3 dozen. All of them were crew, those white little uniforms gone gray and rotten in the water. I saw a few officers down there, I think. They were just bones, so it looked almost like coral at first, until I got closer. That was where I found Cole's mask, sticking out from old ribs and femurs like it had always been there. But it was his all right. All those bones were piled up against one wall like those people had been crawling towards it. Something had been drawn on it, maybe, I don't know. It looked charred like fire had been taken to it. I couldn't look at it long though. Seeing that mask, those bones, it just... We're not alone. I know you don't believe me, but I'm telling you we're not alone. I wasn't in that water alone. Things moved. The currents, you could feel them crawling across your skin, and the shadows never stayed still. There was something down there just out of sight, always just out of my fucking sight. It had me going in circles until my air damn nearly run out. If I'd kept going, kept trying to find it and really lay my hands on it, I would have drowned down there too. You know the last thing Cole said before he went missing? Before something snatched him right out from under my nose? He said, "Who's that?" Something about Charlie's story wormed its way right into my head. I could practically see that place with all those dead skeletons trying to claw their way towards God knows what, could sense and feel the deathly silence hanging in the water. Fuck, was just about all I could manage to say, muttering it under my breath. Well, what do we do now? Gareth asked. And that was when someone knocked the door. Room service. The voice was Cole's. Sir? I've been asked to bring you some room service, on the house. I couldn't quite believe my eyes. Cole was standing just outside the door, back straight and arms to his side. A trolley, full of hidden silver dishes, was beside him. He looked paler than he ever had in life, like a powdered corpse. He was shaking and a thin trickle of sweat rolled across his brow, his eyes fixated on some distant spot behind me. Cole? Charlie heard me say his name and she immediately rushed over and pushed me aside. She saw it was him, really truly him, but before she could get close something stopped her. It was the same thing that had kept me frozen at the doorway. Cole didn't really look like Cole. It was him, sure. But he looked like he'd gone through the ringer, like he was watching his child's coffin get lowered into the ground. He kept licking his lips like he was going to say something, only he didn't quite seem sure what. Cole, what happened to you? Quite the spread, sir, he said, putting his hand on the trolley's handle. It's on the house. His words were wooden, like a recited script. For some reason I imagined a hostage speaking into a phone with a gun against their head. That was exactly what he looked like. He was expecting something of us, I'm sure, but I couldn't say what. By now Gareth was behind me, every bit as confused as the rest of us. Cole smiled like he was about to burst into tears, and then he turned stiffly and walked away. We exchanged brief looks of confusion and immediately followed, calling and shouting for him to stop, but he only sped up. He moved quickly as well. Whenever we got close he'd turn a corner, and by the time we made it around he'd be way down the corridor, only he never ran. He was always impossibly far ahead after every twist and turn. It was as if he was sprinting one out of sight and slowing to a leisurely walk whenever we got close. But why? I thought. What the hell is he playing at? The chase didn't last long. He soon disappeared from sight and we were left alone in just another one of those endless velvet corridors. I tried to see where he might have gone, but it was useless to look for him. He could have been anywhere. In despondent silence we returned to our room, only to suddenly remember the trolley he'd left behind. We lifted each lid and found plates covered in rancid mulch, the food so rotten you couldn't even tell what it had once been. Why would he want us to eat this? Gareth asked. Was that even him? I'd like to take a look at the kitchen, I said. I'd like to know where this came from.